Deputy Roisin Shortall.
Thanks, Ceann Cordia. Taoiseach, we've all been following the events at COP this week, where you made some very ambitious commitments. But will your government's climate actions match your climate rhetoric? That's the question. The omens are not good, it has to be said. Yesterday you said Ireland would sign a pledge to reduce methane emissions by 30%, before hastily adding that this was a global target and not a national one. We hear the Climate Action Plan contains a target of just 10% reduction, and the Taoiseach also used this 10% figure yesterday. Can you explain the purpose of publicly signing up to a 30% reduction target when it seems you have no intention of even attempting to achieve that? So, will the kudos that you got be short-lived, Taoiseach? And will it ultimately just make the country look like it doesn't take its climate action obligations seriously? If every country did this, there is zero chance that the target would be met. So, Taoiseach, can you just be honest and straight with people about what we're actually going to do? We know that Ireland has the second highest greenhouse gas emissions per person in the EU. Agriculture and transport account for the majority of emissions, 35% and 20% respectively. Clearly, we have to focus on these two areas. In agriculture, the government itself seems riven on the plan. Eamon Ryan insists the national herd will decrease, while Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael members have mysteriously started to use the phrase stabilisation whenever the national herd is mentioned. Which is it, Taoiseach? Is it decrease or stabilisation? In transport, your climate action plan will apparently state that we need to reduce car journeys by 25% in order to reach our targets. Can you explain how this can happen in the absence of significant investment in our public transport infrastructure? But we're told that Metro and DART Plus are now not due to be delivered until 2034. Why is there such a lack of urgency from your government, Taoiseach, in progressing large-scale projects like this, which are absolutely essential? And how credible will your retrofitting scheme be, given the underperformance of the current one? Taoiseach, my questions are, firstly, why are you making commitments at COP that you cop out of as soon as the ink is dry on the agreement? Secondly, why should people have confidence in your ability to meet targets, given the lack of clarity and credibility in your existing plans? And thirdly, do you have any real ambition to make the large-scale changes that are needed in order to climate-proof our economy and our society?
Thank you, Deputy Shortall. Taoiseach.
Well, first of all, I thank the Deputy for her comments, but I just have to say that you suffer from an abundance at times through the chair of negativity, and you seem to persistently want to seek to undermine what are genuine and transformative decisions by this government to step change our response to climate change, which we have done through the climate action legislation, through the establishment of the Climate Council and the plan, the carbon budgeting that will occur. And just on the global methane pledge, I think you're being somewhat, through the chair, the deputy's been somewhat disingenuous here. Read the pledge. Read what people have signed up to. It is a global pledge. So globally, collectively, in different ways and through different mechanisms, countries who sign up will contribute to that overall 30% global reduction in methane. And methane emanates, as we know, from a range of human activities, including oil and gas extraction, which we've taken steps in this House to limit it. Deputy Barry, it's not your turn. Coal mining, for example, landfill, as well as agriculture. Okay? So there's a variety of means. And it recognises, the pledge recognises that countries have varying methane emission profiles and reduction potential, and that the energy sector globally has the greatest potential for targeted mitigation by 2030. And that's why the United States, who have partnered with Europe in terms of this pledge, have signalled out their oil and gas industry for particular measures in terms of leakages and so forth, and why Canada, as one of the largest oil and gas producing countries in the world, made a specific pledge in respect of their industry over the coming decade. The positive news yesterday was that so many countries signed up to this pledge, recognising the role of methane in terms of, particularly in the shorter term, in terms of exacerbating global warming and being a particularly concerning issue, and the scientists have pointed to that. And so there is no issue here, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of we signing up to this pledge and we then playing our part through our climate action plan, which will deal with every sector, as you have said. It will deal with energy, it will deal with transport, it will deal with agriculture, it will deal with land use and deforestation, for example. And it's quite complex in terms of the overall issue of dealing with climate change. But this will represent the most detailed approach of any government in respect of this issue. And the government is sincere about this country taking steps and playing its part in terms of this emergency. And that reflects in our increased commitment over and above what we committed in the programme for government to climate finance, for example, which will be very significant for small island development states and low-income countries. And through agriculture, we will also make our contribution to the reduction of methane, and that will be outlined in the climate action plan that we publish tomorrow.
Thanks, Taoiseach. We'd appreciate just a few specifics in relation to this. So in relation to the national herd, are we talking about decreasing the national herd or stabilising it? It's important that we're all clear about what you mean when you give commitments. And it's really important that you're honest with farmers. I think most farmers are perfectly reasonable. They want to know exactly what the plan is and what supports are you going to put in place for diversification. And for example, I mean, what are you going to do with the licences for forestry, you know, as one example of something that just makes it so difficult for farmers? So, you know, will you be clear with farmers and tell us exactly what the intention is in relation to agriculture? Also, what exactly now is the timescale for the Metro project? And finally, I'd like to ask you in relation to retrofitting, it's all very well setting big targets, but are you actually going to change the grant system to make retrofitting affordable for people on average incomes?
Thank you, Deputy Shortall. Taoiseach.
I think there are some fair points in terms of the delivery, but it's absolutely important that we set the targets. Sorry, I am answering the question. And I'm answering the question because you talked about it's all well and good to set targets. No, it's not all well and good. It is vital to set targets. Because if you don't set targets, the investment community don't have the framework within which to change tack and invest in renewables, invest in other spheres of activity and move away from fossil fuels and move away from other activities that generate greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a very important point and should not be dismissed. What government is doing in terms of legislation, in terms of the For example, in terms of the public transport initiatives, we have in the National Development Plan provided the resources for Metro and for a whole range of other things. What I would say is it's time that we looked at how we object to everything in this country.
Can you answer those
I am answering the question because you spoke about Metro and you spoke about public transport. The biggest issue facing us, the biggest issue facing us in wind, for example. And we nearly had a motion this week from the major party opposite on guidelines around wind. The biggest issue will be, are we prepared to allow offshore wind farms in this country?
The biggest issue is,
and are we prepared to allow them properly?
Are you serious about this?
Yes, yes, absolutely serious. I made that clear yesterday. When we were in opposition as a party, we supported the carbon tax, for example, even though it would have been far more easier for us to oppose it as an opposition party, like the current party opposite has done. We have worked to be progressive on this for a number of years. So I'm very serious about this, Deputy, because we simply do not have time as a race to hang around any longer without dealing with climate change. We have to do it. And I would prefer, through the Chair, if you were a bit more engaging and be an advocate for change, as opposed to always nitpicking all the time.
Please. This is Dáil Éireann, our national parliament. Will you please let people